What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman, and it's time to figure out what we are going to play this weekend ranked in Gods Unchained. But first, Daily Play to Earn is doing like a Content Creator of the Year thing. I'm nominated, as well as my teammates, Caution Fun and the Professor. There's a link in the description. You can vote for all of us. It would be much appreciated, and the long and short of it is, if you vote for me and my friends, it'll greatly improve your day-to-day life for so many reasons there's not enough time to explain. So we are on gudex.com looking at God popularity and mythic rank over the past 7 days, and all of this data is pretty much irrelevant because the community contest of last week was to play War, Death, or Nature. Yeah, War, Death, and Nature, which were generally not the most popular gods, so all of the god popularity is out of whack. That being said, the meta hasn't changed in quite some time. The single most popular archetype is still Zoolite, followed by Aggro Deception, and then Aggro Nature. But since the meta has been so stagnant recently, in order to keep the video spicy so it's not too samey, we have a couple of cool budget decks, and also the magic deck this week is really cool, so stick around for that. But now let's just go over the most popular archetypes for each god so you know what you'll be queuing up against this weekend. So nature, generally wild aggro nature, could be Amazons, but usually wild aggro. War is the best god in the game. Control War is its best archetype. It's very expensive, so not a lot of people play it. However, Control War is very good against Zoolite, Aggro Nature, and Hidden Rush Deception, and those are the most popular archetypes. Then we have Deception. Deception can either be Hidden Rush Deception or like Steal Your Stuff, like Controlling Deception. Both archetypes are pretty popular, however, Hidden Rush Deception is more popular. Then for death, we have either Anubians or zombies. Zombies are generally a little bit more popular than Anubians, but they're pretty much even. Like I say every week, if you see your death opponent picks the Soulburn God Power, it means they're zombies. If they pick the Blood Ritual God Power, then they are likely Anubians. Next up, we have magic. Magic can either be tempo magic, control magic, or like a control-y combo magic deck. The control magic variants are the more popular of the magic archetypes. And then we have Light. Light's easy. Light is always Zoolite, despite the fact that it is on the bottom of popularity. Zoolite is, in fact, the most popular archetype, as it has been for the past couple of weeks. So now that we did this brief overview of the meta, let's take a look at some lists you might want to play this weekend. Alright, let's start things off with a couple of budget decks. The first one is the quintessential free-to-play god in nature. This list was made by MZ Jake. And as you can see, it has played 55 games with a 65.5% win rate, so it is quite good. There are no particularly expensive cards in here, obviously no Underbrush Boars, no Finians, no Daggons, stuff like that. But the cards it does have are very strong. We have some very good creatures, as well as some very efficient removal. We have Moonlight Charm to buff up those creatures. We have some Relic removal, so you can win those, death matchups. And then we finish things off with Sudden Bloom, because it's an incredibly strong creature buff, as well as board clear if you need it. And as you can see, this deck is worth $11.50 USD out the door, so it is a complete steal. So if you are looking to play nature on an extreme budget, this deck should do fairly well. And now let's take a look at some budget nature. This is a tempo magic, or sorry, some budget magic. This is a tempo magic list made by Katsuo. And we've been featuring a lot of tempo magic lists in this series. It's a very good archetype, and like the nature deck we just showed, it has a lot of powerful cards. None of the particularly expensive ones, right? There's no White Plains cards in here. There's no Palaces wands. There's no ancient text, stuff like that. But we have lots of powerful cards. You still have all of your bolts because they're essentially free. We have Vordy in here to make up for the lack of Palaces wand card draw. There's a Miraculous Familiar, which isn't technically card draw, but it does generate you cards, so it's pseudo card draw. But most importantly, this deck has played 135 games with a 63% win rate, so it is very consistent and very strong. There are a couple of aspects of this deck that I don't necessarily understand. Like for example, there's one copy of Knowledge as well as one copy of Layhorde Hatchling, both of which are incredibly powerful cards in any tempo magic deck, whether it be pay to win or free to play. And then alternatively, we have cards like Unannounced Arrival and Iron-Tooth Goblin, which aren't necessarily great. So in my opinion, you probably want to drop the Iron-Tooth Goblin and the Unannounced Arrival for another Knowledge and Layhorde Hatchling. However, this player has played 135 games with a very respectable win rate, and this deck is only $38 USD out the door, so it's also quite good and quite cheap. Alright, now that we've scraped the bottom of the bargain bin barrel, it's time to sink our teeth into this Wagyu beef Gods Unchained deck. This is Control War. This list was made by Clutch, And as you can see, this deck is almost 100 times as expensive as the last deck that we looked at, and for good reason. This is by far the best deck in the game. It's been the best archetype for quite some time. Clutch's deck here is really clean. It has no tech cards. This Control War deck is saying, I'm the best deck in the meta. It doesn't matter what your strategy is. If I do my thing, I'm going to win. And as you can see, Clutch has played 40 games with a miraculous 85% win rate. That is very good. But the more impressive thing is the world at large has played over 300 games with a 62% win rate. Those are incredible stats. Those are like need nerf types of stats. So if you have the small fortune required to make this type of deck, I highly recommend it. It wins games most of the time. Alright, next up we have Board Wipe Death. This was the best performing death deck of last weekend ranked event, and this was made by Vendetta. And this is a particularly greedy Board Wipe Death deck. I mean, just look at the curve. As you can see, there are 8 cards that cost 7 or more mana. In fact, there are 2 9-mana cards in this deck, which in my opinion seems like overkill. Like, if you have the Pakria's Monster and Neferu's Khopesh, do you really need the Poly? Like, how often does infinite creatures that have more than 30 attack not winning the game? But that's beside the point. Like I said, this was the best performing death deck of last weekend ranked event. It either went 16 of 18 or 17 of 18. Either way, very powerful. It does have a couple of very interesting cards of note, one of which is the Tomb Carver plus an Empire Reborn combo. Tomb Carver is a 4-mana 4/5 with Afterlife, heal your god for 3. So if you combo it with your Empire Reborn, you destroy your creature, healing you for 3, and then getting you 2 more 4/5s that you can use to trade away your opponent's creatures, subsequently healing you even more. It's a fun combo that heals you for a minimum of 9 health. We also have Taket the Forgotten, which is a card that doesn't see a ton of play in Board Wipe Death, but it is very powerful. It's a 7-mana 2/5, which are not great stats. It has backline and it has a start of turn and roar effect, and you pull the strongest creature from your void and put it onto the board with Soulless. If that creature happens to be an Anubian, you also give it Blitz and Leech. There aren't a ton of Anubians in this deck. In fact, the only ones you'll be pulling off of Taket are most likely going to be your Deathwatch Curate or Neferu, but that doesn't really matter because you can pull huge creatures out of your void like a Healing Elite. A 7-mana 2/5 with backline that has ongoing effect, plus a 10/12 with frontline and protected is kind of broken. It's incredibly strong. We also have Death Unborn, which sets your health total back to 20. It also sets your opponent's health total to 20, and it makes the max health total 20 as well, so you can't heal back to 30 after playing Death Unborn. It also destroys a random creature that costs 5 or more, and it turns your God Power into Blight, which is 2 mana, give a creature burn plus 12. It's a pretty decent sustain tool. It gets rid of 1 strong creature and heals you for as much as 19. We have End Times, board clear makes sense. In Board Wipe Death, just 8 mana, pretty expensive. Besides that, in the neutral slots, we have normal stuff. Like I said, I think the Poly is a bit overkill. Big Healing Elite. We have the White Plains because it's amazing. The other White Plains because it's really good, especially in the control versus control matchups. When you're playing value-based games, it's really strong to be able to get more Polys or more Healing Elites, anything like that. We have Deterra to fight against fatigue. Usually Jason is used, but Deterra gets the job done just as well. So yeah, this is a Board Wipe Death deck. It did pretty well. It has a 66% win rate over almost 70 games, so it's fairly consistent. So if you're a fan of Board Wipe Death and you're trying to get extra greedy, then this could be a great choice for this weekend ranked event. Alright, now we have Control Deception. This list was made by 2 question marks, and we've been featuring Control Deception in this series for the past couple of weeks because it's in a pretty decent spot in the meta right now. It's a stat reduction creatures as well as just decent creatures like Armor Lurker and Switch Duelist. Give it a pretty good chance in the early game against tempo-oriented decks like Zoo Light, Aggro Nature, as well as aggro deception to an extent. Obviously, your creatures are worse at trading against hidden creatures than normal gods. But they have a decent game in the early game against those aggro decks, and then against control decks like Control War, you have cards like Cutthroat Insight to steal their big value engines, as well as Umber Arrow, which also is a big value drain from your control opponents, giving you the ability to steal off their Blind Martyrs and kill it themselves. So when you are in those Control War matchups, if you see your opponent plays a Blind Martyr, likely on 6 or 7 mana, you know they have something great in their hand, so you can start with a Cutthroat, take their Therial or their Avatar, whatever it is, and then the turn after you can Umber Arrow their Martyr of White Plains and take that and just deny them a ton of value, and then you can subsequently outvalue them with your Therials and your ability to copy them, plus whatever you steal from your opponent. So Control Deception, although not as great and dominant as Control War, it is an archetype that can technically hang with the aggressive archetypes as well as the control archetypes. So if you're looking to play an anti-meta deck, then a control list like double question marks here could be a great choice this weekend. Alright, next up we have Magic. This control magic list was made by Sifu, and this is a really cool control magic list because it has no dedicated win condition. It doesn't have any OTK, it doesn't even have big frontline creatures to just smash down the opponent. What it does have is a fair amount of burn and just a ton of value. With 2 Portal Wranglers, 2 Martyrs of White Plains, and a Jason, this deck can get up to 15 bonus legendaries added to your deck, and that's assuming that your Jasons don't delve you any more Jasons. Now, that being said, do you really want 5 Jasons in any given matchup? Probably not. Depending on the quality of your Jason, you realistically only need 1 or 2, but you can use your value generating cards for lots of other things. Obviously, you have cards like Demo, which are great to bring back. You may have noticed that I called this a value-heavy deck that doesn't run Therial. If you run into a control versus control matchup, your opponent probably runs Therial, so they drop Therial, you drop Portal Wrangler, and then boom, you have Therial as well. So you have lots of options. The Martyr of White Plains is particularly interesting. In fact, this deck is unique that in the sense that it has a very powerful Martyr of White Plains combo, as well as a very effective Martyr of White Plains counter. So the combo card, or the main combo card at least, is Eric the Dragon. And this is a combination that I'm surprised I haven't seen more on the ladder. So the Dragon is a 6 mana 1/1 naturally with frontline that gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand, up to 9 attack. And as everybody knows, when you pull a creature back from Martyr of White Plains, it retains all of its buffs, which include the roar effect that Eric the Dragon has naturally. So you can play your Martyr of White Plains on an empty board, they clear your Martyr, you play Eric the Dragon, they kill your Eric, and let's say it was a 9/9, it comes back to your hand with a base stat total of 9/9, so when you play it again, it'll be an 18/18 with frontline, and that's like Hevnir style stats. So that can be absolutely huge. And then the other particularly interesting card of note is Nithos the Mage Weaver, and this is an excellent Martyr of White Plains counter card. So obviously it's a 4-mana card, which means that it comes down the turn after Martyr of White Plains, which is when you want to get rid of the Martyr, obviously. And it has a roar and ability. You target an enemy creature and transform it into a random creature that costs 1 less. If you transform a card, it doesn't go to the void. So your opponent can play Martyr of White Plains, you can transform it into not Martyr of White Plains, and then boom, you've denied all that value. But it's extra good because usually when your opponent plays a Martyr of White Plains, it means their plan is to play a very good creature the turn after. And if they don't deal with your Nithos, then you can just transform that subsequent good creature. So all in all, I think it's a really cool meta inclusion. It's just an excellent counter for Martyr of White Plains, especially in those value-oriented matchups when you're saving your Martyr for your big expensive 7 and 8 mana creatures to be able to deny the Martyr and then also give your opponent like a tricky situation to deal with the turn after is incredibly powerful. Besides that, we just do our normal magic stuff. We have our bolts to control the board. We have Safeguard Incantation because it's really good. It's great in the Magic Mirror matches, and it also just cycles cards. We only have 1 copy of Knowledge, which usually I'm a pretty strong advocate for having 2 copies because the card's just so good. That being said, since this deck is entirely value oriented, blowing up cards in your deck is not particularly good. And since there's no like dedicated win condition revolving around Knowledge, you don't necessarily need 2 copies. So I think it's fine in this instance to have just the 1. That way you can get the bonus Shape Blast or the bonus Unbound Flames when you need it in those aggro matchups. But yeah, all in all, I think this deck is really cool. It seems really fun, just good old-fashioned control magic with some big value and some fun randomness from the Jasons. So if you're a fan of grindy matchups, I think this deck should be really fun and very good this weekend ranked event. Alright, and the last archetype to go over is actually the most popular archetype in Zoo Light. And Zoo Light has been the most popular archetype for well over a month now. We've talked about it week after week over and over again. There's not much more to say that hasn't been said about Zoo Light. The strategy is simple. You play creatures, you buff creatures, you make value trades, you go face, you win games. This is a very strong list, all good cards. As you can see, the initial creator of the deck has played 47 games with a 74.5% win rate, and the world at large has played 150 games with a very nice 69% win rate. So as you can see, this deck wins the vast majority of the times it's played. So if you are a fan of Light, and I know a lot of people are, then this list will do very well this weekend ranked event. Alright, so it is conclusion time. What should we play this weekend ranked in Gods Unchained? And considering weekend ranked has pretty much become Groundhog's Day, the answer should be obvious. I recommend that you play either Zoo Light or Control War, the same things we've been doing for the past little over a month, but whatever you decide to play, try to have fun, tell us how you did in the TST Discord, and have a wonderful day.
Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!